Good morning. This is Molendinarius here from Mi Fa Tota Musica, and this is lesson number 1 in solfeggio. So what we're going to do is we're going to begin from the absolute beginning. I am assuming you know nothing about music at all, that you've never approached a keyboard before. But even if you have, what I'm going to teach you will be new if you haven't studied the system of music as it was taught from the Middle Ages through until the early part of the 1800s, when it was replaced by a different system which was developed by the Paris Conservatory and then that spread throughout Europe, based on the conquests of Napoleon and the imposition of the French curriculum all over the place, and the death of the system that was taught in the conservatories in Naples, the great conservatories that were visited by composers from all over the world and that supplied musicians all over the world. This, you may notice it's only got 4 lines because we're looking at a plain chant stave, a section of the great stave, and the key on the left hand side will be unfamiliar to you. This is the F Fa Ut, the F key, which is now found in our bass clef, we now call it, and the treble clef. It's the clef of F Fa Ut. And even to this day on our 5-line stave, it sits on the line which is F Fa Ut. And the that line is sung as Fa. So we're going to find that on our keyboard. Fa of F Fa Ut. So if we find 3 short keys on my harpsichord, this is a spinet actually, they are different, they reversed colors to a piano, it makes no difference. So we count the 3 short keys, and the very first long key that comes before these 3 short keys is F Fa Ut, which we sing as Fa. Fa. And then we go backwards. Mi, Re, Do. Now, Do was originally sung as Ut. And then because it was easier to sing Do and sounded better than Ut, it was changed to Do. Sometimes I will use Ut and sometimes I will use Do. But most of the time I will simply be replacing it with Fa, and we will see why later on. Now let us have a look at how music works. The first little surprise. We're going to have a look at one sentence from a plain and easy introduction to practical music, set down in the form of dialogues divided into 3 parts. First, teacheth to sing. The second, treateth of descant. The third, treateth of composition, by Thomas Morley, Bachelor of Music, as printed in the year 1597. A good year, apparently. So, without further ado, let me show you this little snippet. So here is the text. I prefer to show you texts and sources rather than just say things off the top of my head, because I think it's important for you as a beginning student to know that this is how music was taught in the textbooks and in the academies and in the conservatories before the rise of the universities, when a different way of teaching music took over and music stopped being taught as a practical craft skill, much more similar in many ways to the way popular musicians learn music, and became an academic discipline, divorced from practice. In fact, that's how the universities saw things in the beginning. They saw the musicians as mere artisans, and they were the intellectual philosophers of music, and invented a whole system of theoretical music theory. And if you actually look at the history of the publication of music theory, you will find that before about 1830, there virtually is none at all. So here we have a text from Morley, and let us see what he says. The 6 notes in continual deduction we have here on the top left, and the master writes, "It is so, and therefore be attentive, and I will be brief. There is in music but 6 notes, which are called ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, and are commonly set down thus." Now what we have in front of us is the F, fa, ut, there on the top left, showing us the position of fa. Now in this case we are in the what we would call the bass, so we are here. We are on fa here, so with the 3 short keys, the long key adjacent, this is our fa. And we'll notice that the first note that he has on this is not actually on that line. If you look carefully, it's the next one down. And we're going to go backwards from the right to the left. So la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut, which brings us to G. Brings us to G, sol, re, ut, which is the line which gives us the other key signature, that little curly thing that's actually a G with an S superimposed on it, for G sol, which is what this is, G sol. And we go ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut. So 6 notes in music, not 7 and not 8. You may have heard that there is an octave in music, but the octave actually isn't real, because there are 7 notes, and the 8th note is simply the repetition of the first, the unison, so called. So 6 notes in music. What is that all about? Well, for many, many hundreds of years, that is what it was, and how music was understood. It's how Mozart understood music, how Bach understood music, how everybody before understood music. And we will see why. Because if you are in the business of building music, which is what musicians were doing back then, they were constructing it, building it. They were not just playing scores. This was something that was done, of course. Musicians wrote scores down, but the vast majority of music was never written down. It was simply played freely at the keyboard or at the organ or on some other instrument like a violin. What we would now call improvisation. But it wasn't thought of that at all. It was playing music, which is why we use the word playing, because we are indeed playing with the music. And there will be an enormous amount of play in this course, enjoyable hopefully, so that you will in time learn how to speak this language. And the alphabet of this language has only got 6 syllables. Ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut. And to be clear, I'm going to use one finger so you can see where my fingers are going. Starting here on C, sol, fa, ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut. This is called the hexachord because it has 6 notes in it. And the scale that we're commonly used to is called the heptachord, which has got 7 notes in it. And the 8th, the octave, is a repetition of the first. So it sounds horribly complicated calling it a hexachord. It's not a very sexy name for a thing, but that's what we have. 6 notes in English. Very simple, really. The 6-note scale. And the one we looked at just before, starting on G, ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut. And this now brings us to the actual lesson itself, the thing that we are learning, which is the hexachord that begins on C, sol, fa, ut. So, once again, find the 2 short keys, and the first key that's in front of those 2 short keys is C, sol, fa, ut. C, sol, fa, ut. You'll get used to these names. I'm going to just keep using them over and over again. C, and we'll see here that we are using it as ut. Si, sol, fa, ut. Ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut. Ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut. Now, if you can't sing, do it anyway. Because it's important, even if you can't hold a tune and you just say the syllables, that the syllables are always associated with the notes. This is a language, and the names, the speech of this language are the syllables. Ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut. Ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut. Ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut. Ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut. Let's go down to C, lower down in the gamut. It's called the gamut because the first note is gamma, which is ut, the lower G. Ut. And this G we will find by finding F, fa, ut, which we learned just before. The 3 short keys, the first key before that is F, fa, ut, and we count down from there. La, sol, fa, mi, re, ut. And that brings us to G, sol, re, ut. And how we find that? The 3 short notes and the second note in of the long ones, where my finger is pressing now. This is G, sol, re, ut. Ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut. Ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut. Ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut. And the sun has just risen, which is what's happening there on the top left of your screen. Ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut. Ut, ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut. And on C, sol, fa, ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut. So if you have a very high voice, of course, you can So that brings us to the end of the first lesson, where we have looked at the basic hexachord, that there are 6 notes in music, and there are 3 basic hexachords. We've only looked at 2 of them so far. We've looked at the hexachord that begins on C, sol, fa, ut, and we've looked at the hexachord that begins on G, sol, re, ut. These hexachords have got names. The one that begins on C, sol, fa, ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut, is called naturalis, or natural in English. It's the natural hexachord. Re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut. And the hexachord that begins on G, sol, re, ut is called durum, or hard. Re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, ut. In the next lesson, we're going to look at mi, fa, and how mi, fa works in the hexachord. And we are also going to introduce the next of the 3 hexachords, which is mollis, or soft. We have naturalis, natural. We have durum, hard. And we have mollis, soft. The 3 hexachords. And then we are going to, in subsequent lessons, learn how to combine them so we can play everything across the entire keyboard. So that's it for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.